Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we started yesterday's show with me telling you I wasn't sure if I knew more or less about college football on the whole than I did before the start of the weekend. And I got to tell you, after watching Michigan and Michigan State, I didn't really believe in either team coming into the weekend. And I'm not sure if I believe in either of them more or less than I did at the beginning of the weekend. That was a crazy game, and it took some doing, but Michigan found a way to lose it. So, I mean, that is an achievement of sorts.
I didn't think Jim Harbaugh could do it, but then he did. And so, yes, welcome to our Michigan Monday edition of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, looking back on Michigan's 37-33 come from ahead loss to Michigan State. Michigan led 23-14 at the half, led 30-14 late in the third quarter, and then gave up two relatively quick touchdowns and 2-point conversions to tie it. Michigan takes the lead 33-30 with a Jake Moody 36-yard field goal, and then that goes away following a Kenneth Walker 23-yard touchdown to seal it. And then Michigan had a couple of opportunities to tie this one, or to actually to win it, and they, Cade McNamara, bless him, had probably his best game as a Wolverine. Although maybe to say his best game as a Wolverine is selling short what he's been asked to do in the past, and maybe the 13 of 19s for 136 that he's had in the past. Maybe that's what Jim Harbaugh would prefer, and maybe that's the best version of him. But he was 28 for 44 for 383 yards with one touchdown, two interceptions, had a long of 93 yards on basically a little slant or an in route that went the distance from freshman Andrell Anthony, who came out of almost nowhere to be a star in this one. But even at the end, Tom, Cade McNamara looks good, has making some of the best throws of his career. At the end, he lofts one up to a tight end down the sideline, and it's intercepted on a pass that it's not a lazy pass. It was a floater. It was picked off. The game was over.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Andrell Anthony, congratulations on winning the Ricky White Joe Hardy from Damn Yankees. Like, where did this guy come from, and how is he so good? And will we ever see this guy again? Because for Ricky White, the answer is no. For Andrell Anthony, the answer is TBD. But yeah, it was interesting. It was a very strange game to me because I think we came into the game thinking, well, Michigan can run the ball. We know one thing: Michigan can run the ball. And the question is, well, can Michigan throw the ball, and can Michigan throw the ball downfield? And they hit big plays in the passing game without necessarily throwing the ball downfield. That 93-yarder to Anthony, there was not an exemplary angle taken by the safety on that play where, that probably could have been a 15-yard gain and not a 93-yard gain. But, Anthony, he was targeted 6 times. It said he was targeted 6 times, but he had one in the end zone. So he must have been targeted 7 times, but
10 times on my box score.
Oh, okay. Well, Game on Paper, I'll have to have a fist fight with GameOnPaper.com later. But yeah, 6 catches, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, that is a big, big day for him. And that's something that Michigan has needed in that passing game. Since Ronnie Bell got hurt in that season opener, they have not had that big play guy who can, whether it's a pass downfield or, turning a short pass into a long game. They have not really had that. Cornelius Johnson's been good in spots. Dylan Baldwin's made a couple plays here and there, but they have not really had that. Maybe Andrell Anthony is the answer there. And it was a good game for Cade McNamara overall. But, I think you go back to last week's show, we're saying they need to have been playing JJ McCarthy more. And, this was a little bit of like the monkey paw game where, you make a wish. It's like, you should play KJJ McCarthy more. It's like, no, not like that. Don't do that. You can't pull. I've never liked the pull the guy in the middle of the series and then put the other quarterback in for a play or two, and then pull that guy and put the other guy back in. Like you don't get in a rhythm. You get very predictable. It's like, oh, wait, well, the running quarterback's in. So, okay. Are they going to run it? Probably. Maybe they're going to do something really sneaky and throw a pass, but I have never really liked that. Like if you want to give a guy a drive, you give a guy a drive. I don't like the in for a play, out for a play kind of thing that they've been doing. And that really came back to bite him towards the end of the game.
Yeah, almost passive aggressive in nature. Jim Harbaugh's like, okay, you want him? I'll give him to you. I'm going to have him fumble twice.
I'm going to make you smoke the whole pack. Yeah,
exactly. So yes, they smoked the entire pack of JJ McCarthy. He fumbled twice, got away with the first one. And Jim Harbaugh was like, you know what? Let's open up that second pack. And then boom, fumble again. Michigan State recovers. And that's another, both Michigan quarterbacks allowed this one to get away in different ways, which I guess, hey, that's a balanced offense for you. But yeah, Michigan Michigan State has an okay defense and that they, they're not clowns. I thought Michigan would be able to run the ball better than they did.
High praise indeed from Tony Gerdeman.
They rushed for 146 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, but Hassan Haskins, 4.2 yards per rush, Blake Corum, 3.5 yards per rush. Neither guy got going. Hassan Haskins had a 24-yarder in there, so then his other 13 carries went for 35 yards. And so they weren't great, couldn't get stuff established. Probably why they're throwing some short stuff and just using that as an extension of the running game, as we saw Penn State do against Ohio State. So while we were like, yeah, Michigan needs to open up the passing game, and so they did, and they scored 37 or 33 points because of it, or they scored quite a bit because of it. Losing the running game or having the running game less effective, or they just weren't able to do everything they needed to do. When one thing gets shut down, you need to be able to do the other and do it effectively. And their passing game is only so effective, as we saw, and it just came back to bite them at the end. And then let's turn to the Michigan defense, Tom, because we were wondering about that defensive line. I thought they held up early pretty well, and they made some plays. But Kenneth Walker, he's probably the best player I've seen in the Big Ten. Like I really, really, really like TreVeyon Henderson, and we've seen what he can do. Kenneth Walker is doing this with Michigan State's offensive line. So to me, that's more impressive. And he's really fun to watch. He's done this against a variety of defenses. Has he done it against any great defenses yet? No, I guess we'll see what the rest of the season has to hold if he gets there. But he was the difference maker for me in this one. Peyton Thorne did enough to be effective, but if I have Kenneth Walker on my team, I'm trying to wear that guy out, because eventually he's going to bust something and we're going to look good because of it.
But I was looking at the live, advanced stats box score during the game at one point and tweeted out, like, what are you doing? Like, one of these things is very much working and one of these things is very much not working. Why are you throwing the ball, you dumb, stupid idiots? Give it to the guy who's extremely good. And, normally when I tweet something like that out, the guy immediately fumbles or runs backwards 90 yards for some stupid reason. And that was one where I hit send on it, and like 30 seconds later, like, boom, he takes off for that one of those long touchdowns. It was like, oh, look, how about that? I got one. Good for me. It reminded me a lot of the 2020 Big Ten championship game, where we're sitting in Lucas Oil Stadium going, does the Ohio State coaching staff, are they watching the same game I am? Like, TreVeyon Henderson's averaging like 15 yards a carry. Why are you throwing the ball with Justin Fields, who has a banged up thumb, doesn't look right? Like, the guy who's averaging 10, 15 yards a carry, like, just keep giving him the ball until Northwestern stops him. And guess what? Northwestern never stopped him. The only one who was stopping him was the Ohio State coaching staff. He set the school record that day. Kenneth Walker, like, I don't know what the Michigan State school rushing record was, but it felt like Kenneth Walker might have been able to set the Michigan State school rushing record. He ended up with 19 carries, 179 yards, 4 touchdowns, but 19 carries. Like, what are you doing? You had 62 plays from scrimmage. Give him another 10 carries. See what happens. Because watching him, it's like, yeah, the odds are he's going to bust one at some point. He is really, really good. And, to your point, the Michigan State offensive line is not fantastic. And I think we saw that especially in pass pro. I mean, they were okay. They were decent in the run game, but the pass pro was like troubling. And, obviously a lot of that credit goes to Michigan, and we'll get to David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson in a minute. But, that was not a dominant Michigan State offensive line. And Kenneth Walker's good, but he's not, is he, 3 times as good as TreVeyon Henderson? No. I think, Michigan fans have to, number one, be real ticked off about the fact that they somehow managed to not win this game. But number two, the way Michigan State was able to run the ball against Michigan, and without having a commensurate downfield passing attack to really supplement it, but also the way they were able to use tempo. Like there was a lot of like, oh boy, we've talked about cracks in the dam before. Like, you're getting some leaks springing through, and the leaks are getting bigger, and you can see like, there's a lot more water rushing down this river towards this dam in about a month.
I think you need to send another email to Game on Paper. My Michigan box score has Kenneth Walker with 23 for 197. So there's 4 carries missing or 4 carries added. I don't know who to blame. I'm not going to blame mgoblue.com though. You, sir, you can forget it. One of the more telling stats is none of those tackles on Kenneth Walker came in a backfield. So even though they did penetrate at times, he was able to make a guy miss and get some yards, sometimes get a lot of yards, and just keep the chains moving, keep them, keep things going forward, and just, not make things difficult for Peyton Thorne. Michigan State had 20 first downs. They finished with 199 yards rushing, 196 yards passing. So, hey, great job on the balance. But really, the only playmakers on Michigan's defense in this one, I think David Ojabo was fantastic. 2 sacks, forced fumble, was really, really disruptive. And this one showed the athleticism that everybody was recruiting him for. Aiden Hutchinson, another sack as well. RJ Moten had a nice interception. And you started to see early on, you were seeing some stuff from the defensive line, and it was like, okay, this is good. But what we always talk about with the Michigan defensive line and Michigan defense as a whole, it's like, will they wear down? Can they rotate enough to just stay fresh? And is there enough talent for that fresh defense to also hold up? Because it's one thing if you're fresh, but you're not talented. There's another thing. And it's, if you're talented and not fresh, it's pretty much the same thing. You need talent and you need to be refreshed. And if you don't have the depth for either of those things, and depth is more than just numbers, depth is also talent in numbers. And this is something that Michigan hasn't had up front for a while. And I would say they don't have it on defense as a whole. And you can go to any level of the defense and you'll see that there are things lacking. And, how much more effective would Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson be if they were able to come in and rotate a little? But you can't afford to take these guys off the field because they're the best thing that you've got. And they provide an opportunity for a short field, for turnovers, for all sorts of those things. So those guys continue to be good. I think that's going to be a very fun matchup to watch when Ohio State and Michigan play, is those two against Nick Petit-Frere and DeJuan Jones, Ohio State's offensive tackles. And they may be trading off all, throughout the game. But those two guys, give them all the credit in the world. But, you also have to contain Kenneth Walker, and they didn't.
Yeah. And, to your point about the Michigan defensive ends against the Ohio State tackles, like that seems like if Michigan's going to contain Ohio State's passing game, because Michigan still has not faced a team that throws the ball nearly as well as Ohio State does, especially downfield. If Michigan's going to contain that Ohio State passing game, it's going to have to be with the pass rush, which means you're going to have Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo getting home. And Ohio State, I don't think they've played a team that has tackles nearly as good as Ohio State. So that's going to be one that, it feels like if you tell me how many sacks and quarterback hurries David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson have in that Ohio State game, I can probably tell you, with reasonable degree of confidence, how many points Ohio State has. Are they getting 2.5 sacks between them and another few hurries? Like, okay, that's where Michigan maybe can hold Ohio State to 30. If they're not getting pressure, that's where Ohio State's starting to, it's starting to look like a pinball machine on Ohio State's side of the scoreboard. Kenneth Walker is interesting to me because he's had big games, and he had, 8.6 yards per carry against Michigan. That's a big game. 8 yards per carry against Rutgers. That was a big game. 8.1 against Youngstown State in very limited carries. And then 11.5 against Northwestern. Everyone else, like Miami was 6.4. Everyone else is like 5.3 and below. I mean, Nebraska, 19 carries, 61 yards, 3.2 per. 23 carries, 84 yards, 3.7 per against Indiana. I mean, these are not like dominating defenses, But it feels like if you try and really concentrate on stopping the run, you have a chance to do it. And Michigan just couldn't do it. So, does that to you reflect a structural issue with the Michigan defense? Is that just the fact that they wore down in the second half, and that's why you saw those bigger runs for Kenneth Walker late? Like, what do you think that is? What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, and I'll watch it again before I write up Michigan Monday to see, if they're staying in nickel the entire time, is that the right decision? And we know they're not deep at linebacker. Josh Ross led the team with 10 tackles. Junior Colson played quite a bit, so I'm looking at the box score. Maybe they did play a lot of three linebackers because Nakai Hill Green is also in there as well. But to me, it always comes down to the defensive line, and I have to go back and look to see how many yards in the first quarter, how many yards in the second quarter, and I wouldn't be shocked if there's a correlation there. And I continue to go back to maybe it's too easy, but if the defensive line gets tired, it doesn't matter what's going on behind it and what kind of structure you have or what kind of scheme you have. It starts there. And, this is something they're going to have to look at. Mike McDonald, Jim Harbaugh, everybody, because things aren't going to get easier. And came into this game thinking that Michigan State had the second best offense in the Big Ten. They didn't show that against Indiana, 2 weeks ago. I think they showed that here in this one, and the ability to make plays. Peyton Thorne can run the ball. If he has time, he can connect. He's got good receivers. Jaden Reed, Jalen Naylor. I know one of them got hurt, so I'm not sure how that will limit them against Ohio State. But they have just a unique set of guys, and they're not overly deep on offense, but they use what they have. And as long as Peyton Thorne is accurate, he can move the chains and move the ball. But yeah, I don't know what else Michigan could have done. I don't know that did they miss a lot of tackles. Kenneth Walker naturally makes you miss, but it didn't seem like, gosh, Michigan just looks really bad here. I think Kenneth Walker just looks really good here, and there's some downfield blocking as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain point where, generally there was like one guy at the line of scrimmage who maybe had a chance to tackle him. And if you didn't get him at the line of scrimmage, like, well, then he's 10 yards downfield. And once he's 10 yards downfield, there's a decent chance he ends up 60 yards downfield because he's got some pretty good speed. And that I think is probably fairly reflective of what Travion Henderson has the opportunity to do against Michigan. You can say he's not quite where Walker is right now, but he's probably got a better offensive line and he's got a better passing game to supplement him. So watching that game, did you kind of come away with the thought that, Travion Henderson might run for 8 yards a carry against Michigan? And, if Travion Henderson's running for 8 yards a carry against Michigan and Ohio State's able to throw the ball somewhat, as we say repeatedly, if you can run the ball better than the other team, you're going to win the Ohio State Michigan game. That's just every year. That's how it works. Yards per carry. Whoever wins that wins the game. That's just tried and true every single year, basically for the last 20 years. So it felt like watching the Michigan game, I had questions answered for myself in terms of like, well, okay, Cade McNamara is able to do some of the stuff in the passing game. Maybe they've solved some of their issues in the passing game in terms of Andrew Anthony providing them some answers in terms of big play guys. But, the running game just kind of disappearing, the fact that, they just kind of found ways to lose. And then it felt like Harbaugh was, kind of got out to a lead and then did the Jim Harbaugh thing where he got out to a lead and then didn't try to really step on Michigan State's throat. It was like, okay, well, we've got a 2-score lead now, 16 points. Like, well, I mean, what are the odds they get 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions? Like, I'm sure we've got this now. So let's just run the clock and get out of here. That's you've seen Michigan fans have seen that. That was kind of Lloyd Carr in the 2005 Ohio State Michigan game. Like, well, it's a 9-point lead. Like, what could happen? Well, I mean, come on, just run the clock, get out of here, win the game. And sometimes you have to finish, you have to finish the drill. And, for Harbaugh to still not be doing that, I think is a little, that's, he has broken some of his bad habits this year, but he has not broken all of them.
I think maybe there's also an issue with Michigan's red zone because it sure seemed like there's a period where JJ McCarthy is now the red zone quarterback because he's the guy who can actually throw the ball into the end zone, which he did and threw a touchdown. But they did bog down. They're in the red zone 6 times, 2 touchdowns, 4 field goals. 4 field goals is a lot. I wonder what the record is on teams that kick 4 field goals in a game, because this one is Michigan kicked 4 field goals, Michigan State kicked 0. And granted, the Spartans were only in the red zone twice, but they made the most of their opportunities. Michigan, however, had field goals of 26, 38, 35, and 36. And great job by Jake Moody kicking all of these clutch field goals. And they needed all of them. But the reliance on field goals, and you can just we've seen it with Ohio State and Michigan, where it's like you keep making it down the field. And Ryan Day even said it this week, like when teams kick a field goal, they're giving up 4 points, and Ryan Day gave up 4 points quite a bit, and they view this almost as a win on defense. It's like, hey, we just saved 4 points, and 4 times down the field, Michigan State was saved 4 points by Jim Harbaugh kicking field goals. Now, one of those came at the end of the half, so it is what it is. And not every situation lends itself to going for it, but the red zone may have been the deciding factor in this one. Obviously, if Michigan is twice scores on touchdowns on 2 of those, this is a much different game. Scores on 1 more of those, it's a much different game. And so credit to Michigan State's defense that continues to create questions about Michigan's offense. You're okay from the 20 to the 20, but then when you get to the red zone, and I think I said last week, I want to go through and see exactly how many times Cade McNamara has thrown into the end zone this year, like from the red zone, not a deep pass where, it just goes that far, but how reticent are they to do that with them? And now, with the JJ McCarthy thing in this one, maybe that was a plan for him, and maybe that's something they're going to continue to do. I wonder how much Jim Harbaugh feels about McCarthy being trusted in that area now. And I think he was asked a little bit about JJ McCarthy after the game. Didn't really have much to say, as Jim Harbaugh is wont to do when asked about stuff after a loss. So it will be interesting to see how they move forward with the red zone stuff, but it's clearly an issue.
It's an issue for them, and it's an issue for Ohio State right now too. I mean, if you go back through Ohio State's loss to Oregon, it was like, well, they went for it on 4th down a bunch and didn't get it, and that cost them. It was ultimately a 7-point loss against Penn State. They really, you look at the game, they really should have been up on Penn State. If you're in the red zone 6 times and you even score 50% touchdowns, well, Ohio State wins that game by 17 points. And we're having a very different conversation today about the Ohio State Penn State game than people around Columbus are right now. You can't just kick field goals all the time. You can't fail to go get it. You've got to be able to punch the ball in. And a lot of that comes down to, what are the commonalities here between Ohio State and Michigan on Saturday? Didn't run the ball consistently. Like Ohio State was able to eventually get a push and sort of break through, but they weren't able to run the ball consistently at the beginning of the game. Quarterbacks sometimes, looked a little off. CJ Stroud had one where Chris Olave was open and just, there was either a miscommunication or something, but it's like, you have to be able to connect on the plays that are there in the passing game. Just a little bit of inconsistency for both teams that's got to get ironed out. And for Michigan, not being able to run the ball. I mean, Michigan State's defense is fine. They're not incredible. That looks like a defense that Ohio State should score 40 something points against. You should be able to run the ball against those guys. If you are if you are as a team what you think you are as a team, you got to be able to run the ball against those guys. You shouldn't have to just go, well, we're just gonna throw the ball. We'll just make it work. That's what happened to Ohio State against Oregon. They couldn't run the ball consistently, so they had to lean real heavily on CJ Stroud. And yeah, he had 3 100-yard receivers, but Oregon was able to bend but don't break. Defenses view bend but don't break as a positive. So, that means if they bend and you get down to the red zone and you kick a field goal, they have bent but not broken. That is a positive for the defense. That means it's a negative for the offense. So, Michigan's got to either figure out the quarterback thing, whether it's McCarthy or McNamara, or they got to be able to run the ball better. I mean, one or the other. If you can run the ball, you can have a lot of success in the red zone. If you can't, if you're relying on the pass game and you don't have just, an elite quarterback who's, really, really locked in and very on his game that day, that's when you start having problems.
It will be interesting to see what Michigan does in relation to Ohio State when those two teams play. Penn State maybe threw some blueprint out there on how better to contain Ohio State. I don't know how easily actuated that is done by other actualized that other teams can do that. Also, some of that was just lack of execution on Ohio State's part. So I mean, that's part of everybody's plan, and that's the whole bend but don't break. It's like, well, eventually they're going to throw something in the dirt, and it'll be 3rd and 8, and then it's going to be a tougher first down to pick up. Ohio State didn't execute well on their own terms. Like they had issues with snap counts, they had false starts, they had miscommunications with throws. You can't expect that to be what bails you out down the road. It's like, look, Michigan's defense, they're all like, well, we'll do this. And then we'll just hope for the best that Ohio State will be at their worst on several specific plays. And that's not actually a winning game plan. It's a game plan that may allow you, or it's not a game plan. It's like a happenstance that may allow you to win. And Penn State made the most of it, could have made more of it. But I don't think Michigan can go in and expect it. Now they realize, hey, if we do this and we do this and we just hold up in the red zone, we're going to have an opportunity because we can run the ball. We've shown we can throw it. But again, I think Ohio State is going to be focused on cleaning up the red zone issues, and we'll see what they do. But this was the Penn State game. I don't know that you can just expect that to happen, any given week. You
Right.
can't expect it to happen any given week. You can't expect it to happen your given week, basically.
Yeah, you have to be able to take control of what you can take control of. If it's like, well, as long as the other team doesn't execute, like that's fine. Sometimes that'll work out for you, but a lot of times it won't. I mean, Ohio State has executed pretty well overall the last couple of years. CJ Stroud has had moments where he looked a little shaky. The running game has had moments where it looked shaky, but on the whole, they've been reasonably good. I don't think you can rely on Ohio State to fail in order to have your team succeed. You have to be able to do some stuff on your own. And it feels like Michigan's kind of getting closer to like, well, there is a path to victory, but it doesn't seem like there's a reliable path to victory.
Yeah. And while you can contain Travion Henderson for a while, you just felt like in that game he was eventually going to bust something out. You give him enough opportunities, something is going to go warning track power and beyond. And he did that one, taking one 68 yards and then punching it in after that. So you've got to be able to play all 4 quarters against Ohio State. Michigan, that's where we keep going back to that defensive line. Can they hold up for all 4 quarters? Can the secondary hold up? They weren't able to against Michigan State, and Ohio State's a different animal. And so there's going to be lessons learned for Michigan in this one. They'll know what they have to tighten up, but I think they also already knew that. They were just, I don't want to say getting away with it, just never presented it to them as a challenge before. No other teams were able to do what Michigan State could do because they didn't have all of Michigan State's talent. And now you saw what happened, 37 points on the 5 touchdowns. And that's, I guess it should be a wake-up call for Michigan. I know they're probably a little bit in disbelief. There's some anger there. But, I mean, Michigan State went in there. They clearly, Mel Tucker has changed this program, and he may have changed it so well that he's at LSU or somewhere next year, and Michigan is just left to wonder, like, is this ever going to change? And it's unfortunate for them. They had this one, they let it get away, and you can't even. How much faith can you have in them that won't happen again any given week?
Yeah, it's just tough because it feels like, it's a little bit like Nebraska where it's like you can see the progress, it's getting better, but you're still having the same kind of failure points at the same times in the same very predictable ways. And like it feels like it's the end of the road for Scott Frost. And Michigan obviously is in much better shape than Nebraska is this year. But if you're going to win 10 games, but you lose to Michigan State, you lose to Ohio State, how happy are Michigan State fans really? Or Michigan fans really? And, the Penn State game doesn't look like that's a given either, especially on the road now. That has to be very tough for Michigan fans right now because, it feels like it's a successful season. It feels like they should have beaten Michigan State, and it just another one gets away. That is a real tough game for them. And that, it's like Harbaugh is going to be back next year, but how happy does that really make Michigan fans at this point if they do go 9-3 with those 3 losses?
Yeah, knowing next year, then you also have to travel to Ohio State. I do think I feel better about Michigan's chances in this one against Ohio State now than maybe I did a couple of days ago, seeing how Ohio State did struggle against Penn State and seeing how Michigan was able to move the ball through the air. I still don't think their chances are great that they'll be able to beat Ohio State because Ohio State is still going to be able to run the ball. Michigan still has the same secondary. They still have the same quarterback that can do some stuff, but also you feel like you can get one from him. While you shouldn't expect bad plays from the opponent, I think there's enough there from Cade McNamara to where there's no real need to fear what he can do. And now I wonder if this is going to force Jim Harbaugh to even close ranks even more with the offense. Like, see, we tried throwing the ball. Look what happened. We're just going to go back to knowing what we know how to do. And I've talked with Brian Ferentz. He's on board. He thinks I'm doing the right thing.
That's got to be frustrating because it's like you feel like the answer is there for Michigan, and ultimately it feels like JJ McCarthy probably is the answer. And we have seen promising looking quarterbacks not develop under Harbaugh over the years, but it certainly seems like a year or two from now, McCarthy could be that dude for them in a way that they just haven't had that dude at quarterback since Harbaugh's been there. But the short term, this goes back to something we talked about last week. You have the kind of moral hazard where you have to win this year, and what's best for you in the short term when you are coaching potentially for your job is not necessarily what's best for the program in the long term. Because if they're going to go 9-3 this year and lose to Penn State and lose to Michigan State and lose to Ohio State, wouldn't they be better just kind of taking the long-term approach? And, we always say a true freshman's going to lose you a game. So you lose those 3 games and you also lose to Nebraska, say, because JJ McCarthy made a bad choice or, threw a bad interception or fumbled the ball or whatever it is. Aren't you better next year at 8-4 with those 3 losses you didn't want to lose, but with a quarterback who's coming in and has a higher ceiling and a lot more experience? Aren't you better off there than you would be, with, okay, well, now you're 9-3. Congratulations. You're 9-3 instead of 8-4. And you're going to the Citrus Bowl instead of the Outback Bowl. Great. Congratulations. But now you're, JJ McCarthy is, doesn't have that year of reps, doesn't have that year of experience, doesn't have that year of reading defenses and all of that stuff and being a team leader. That long-term goal, you can't really think long-term when you're coaching for your job every single year because you've got that weird contract now. So, that really puts Harbaugh in a tough spot. And ultimately, I don't think that's what's in Michigan's best interest is for him to be, making the right decision for him instead of what's probably, to me at least, the right decision for the program.
I get Drew Henson vibes from JJ McCarthy, which means probably time for Yankee ownership to throw a bunch of money at JJ McCarthy to have him come play third base for the, Columbus Clippers back in the day, even though, of course, the Clippers are now an Indians affiliate. Or
NFL Hall of Famer, Cade McNamara. You heard it here first.
So anything else, Tom, before we get out of here?
I think that's it. I mean, we'll see. These shows keep getting more interesting. Who does Michigan have next week? They've got good question. They have a couple interesting ones coming up in the end of the season. I don't think they have Michigan. I don't think they have Penn State next week. They have
Indiana and
Indiana. Yeah. So Indiana, they should beat Indiana at home, but then go at Penn State, at Maryland, which is like, not dangerous, but maybe, and then home for Ohio State. I mean, this is going to be a real interesting November for Harbaugh. What does success look like? What is a successful November? Indiana at Penn State, at Maryland, Ohio State. If they go 2-2, is that success or is that acceptable? Or
no, 3-1 has to be.
They have to be 3-1 to be acceptable.
Yeah, to be successful. Yeah. I think fans aren't going to be happy with the loss to Ohio State. I think they'd be thrilled with the loss at Penn State and a win over Ohio State. They would take that right now, I think, and go with that. Over under, Tom, sacks between David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson against Maryland. I'm going to set at I guess I'll set it 2.5, even though 3 seems like a push. So I'll set it at 2.5 for you. Where are you going?
I'll take the over on that one because it feels like Maryland's can be pass heavy and predictably pass heavy. So I'll take the over on that one. And the nice thing is that's 3 weeks away, so there's no chance we'll remember that. So I'll take my bold stand that they're going to have more than that, and no one will ever check my math, so it'll be fine.
Perfect. I love it. So that will do it with this edition of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. You can find us at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop as always. And if you're watching this, you can find our podcast on any platform you use. Just search Buckeye Weekly Podcast and you'll find us there. Go ahead and subscribe and listen at your leisure. So thank you all, and we will talk to you guys later.